It's complex, darling, beyond your current expertise. My stepmother's voice was as sharp as her cheekbones as she slid the papers across the table, a contract to sign away my inheritance. I'm Natalie Collins, a 25-year-old lawyer, and they saw me as a child to be managed. My father stared at his hands, my stepbrother smirked, and the family lawyer just watched, his eyes blank. They were about to steal my mother's legacy right in front of me. What they didn't know was that my law degree wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a weapon I was about to unload. Before I show you how I turned their boardroom into my battlefield, drop your city in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe, because trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when you underestimate the quiet one in the room. I stood on the hill overlooking Aurelia Vineyards, the sun spilling gold across the rolling rows of grapevines, their leaves trembling in the Napa Valley breeze. This place was my mother's heart, her sweat, her soul. Every vine was a testament to her, Elizabeth Collins, the woman who turned a patch of dirt into a legacy. I could still see her, years ago, kneeling in the soil, her hands stained with earth, her laugh bright as the summer sky. I was 16 then, all awkward limbs and big dreams, and she'd pressed a silver locket into my palm. Truth is the soil from which justice grows. My love, she'd said, her eyes fierce with something I didn't yet understand. Never forget where you come from, or what you're capable of. I clutched that locket now, its cool weight against my skin the only thing grounding me. It had been a year since Mom died, her body stolen by a sickness that came too fast, too cruel. I'd buried my grief in work, building a quiet life as a lawyer in San Francisco, but the vineyard always called me back. Today, it wasn't the vines that summoned me. It was an email, cold and formal, from Mr. Abernathy, the family lawyer who'd known me since I was a kid. Urgent meeting at the estate, it read. No warmth, no explanation, just a time and a place. The main house loomed ahead, all glass and stone, a monument to Mom's success that now felt like a stranger's domain. My stepmother, Eleanor, had moved in the day Mom's will was read, her perfume lingering in rooms that used to smell of Mom's lavender soap. I parked my beat-up sedan next to Eleanor's sleek Mercedes, feeling the familiar sting of being out of place. Inside, the air was thick, the kind of tension that hums before a storm. My father, Richard, sat at the head of the polished oak table, his tie too tight, his eyes darting like a trapped animal. Eleanor, all sharp cheekbones and colder eyes, sipped her wine with the grace of a predator. Her son Brandon leaned back in his chair, his smirk as polished as his tech bro haircut. He was 25, my age, but carried himself like he owned the world. Natalie, Eleanor said, her voice smooth as silk but sharp as a blade. So good of you to come. I nodded, my throat tight. Mr. Abernathy, his white hair neatly combed, slid a folder across the table. A family investment agreement, he said, his tone clipped, for Brandon's startup. A revolutionary venture, I'm told. Brandon's grin widened. Disrupting the market, Nat, big things. My father cleared his throat. It's temporary, Natalie. We need your signature to transfer your stake in the vineyard to a trust, for the family's future. My stake, Mom's stake. The 50% she'd left me, her only child. It's to protect what she'd built. I opened the folder, my hands steady despite the earthquake in my chest. The words blurred, legal jargon masking something ugly. Why wasn't I consulted? I asked, my voice quieter than I meant. Eleanor's laugh was a delicate thing meant to wound. Oh, darling, it's complex, beyond your current expertise. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. Brandon's smile didn't waver, and Abernathy, the man who'd brought me hot cocoa at Mom's funeral, just stared, impassive. It's a formality, Natalie, he said. Your mother trusted Richard's judgment. The room tilted. This wasn't just a request. It was a theft. My mother's legacy, the vineyard she'd poured her life into, was being pried from my hands. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to demand how they could betray her like this. But I'd learned long ago that showing weakness in this house was like bleeding in shark-infested waters. I forced a smile, the one I'd honed in law school, sharp and unreadable. I'll need to review this with my own counsel, I said, standing. A formality, you understand? Eleanor's eyes narrowed, but I was already walking out, the folder clutched tight, my heart pounding with a mix of rage and grief. I'd just declared war, and I wasn't sure I was ready for the fight. Back in my San Francisco apartment, the walls felt too close, the city's hum too loud. The folder from Abernathy sat on my kitchen table, a ticking bomb. I poured a second cup of coffee, my hands shaking, not from the caffeine, but from the betrayal still burning in my gut. They'd treated me like a child, like I didn't belong in Mom's world. Eleanor's patronizing tone, Brandon's smug grin, my father's cowardice, it all churned together, a poison I couldn't spit out. I opened the folder again, my lawyer's brain kicking in. The agreement was a masterpiece of deceit, every clause a trap wrapped in velvet. It promised my stake would be returned once Brandon's startup hit some vague milestone, but the fine print gave Richard and Eleanor full control of the trust. My father, who'd never stood up to Mom when she was alive, was now her executioner. And Eleanor, God, she was the architect of this. I could see it in her eyes, that calculating glint she hid behind her perfect smile. I turned to the one person I thought I could trust. Abernathy. He'd been Mom's confidant. The one who'd helped her build the vineyard's legal foundation. He'd drafted her will, promised to protect her wishes. I called him, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. Abernathy, you knew Mom, she'd never agree to this, tell me you're not part of it. His pause was too long, his voice too cold. Natalie, your mother trusted Richard to make sound decisions. This is legal, it's wise. You're letting emotions cloud your judgment. The phone slipped from my hand. Abernathy wasn't just complicit, he was in deep. The man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd hugged me at Mom's funeral, was selling me out. The room spun, my breath shallow. I was alone. More alone than I'd ever been. My family, the people who should have been my anchor, were the ones cutting me adrift. I sank to the floor, the folder spilling papers around me. For a moment, I wanted to give up, to sign their damn papers and walk away. What chance did I have against their money, their power, their lies? But then my fingers brushed the locket around my neck, Mom's locket. I could almost hear her voice, fierce and unyielding. Never forget what you're capable of. I stood, wiping tears I hadn't realized I'd shed. They expected me to break, to crumble under their pressure. But I wasn't the naive girl they thought I was. I grabbed the papers, spreading them across my table like a battlefield. I'd fight, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. For Mom, for the truth. I worked through the night, my eyes burning, my coffee cold. The documents were airtight, every loophole sealed. Doubt crept in, whispering that I was out of my depth, that Mom had trusted Richard for a reason. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was paranoid. But then, as dawn broke, I fidgeted with the locket, twisting it in my fingers. A faint click stopped my breath. The back popped open, revealing not a photo, but a tiny micro SD card nestled beneath the picture of me and Mom. My heart raced as I plugged it into my laptop. A folder appeared. Insurance. Mom had known. Even in her final days, she'd been fighting for me. The SD card was a lifeline, a piece of Mom still here, still fighting. I opened the insurance folder, my hands trembling. Scanned documents filled the screen, original vineyard partnership agreements, medical records from Mom's final weeks, audio files labeled with dates. My chest tightened as I clicked the first recording. Mom's voice, weak but defiant, filled my apartment. I don't trust Eleanor, she said, her words slurred from medication. She's too close to Abernathy. Richard's not strong enough to stop her. I listened, horrified, as Eleanor's voice came next, smooth and coaxing, pressuring Mom to sign something. Abernathy was there too, his tone clinical, guiding her hand. It's for the best, Elizabeth, he said, for the family. My father's voice was there too, faint, protesting once before falling silent. This wasn't just greed, it was predation, a calculated dismantling of Mom's will while she was too sick to fight back. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't just grief. They were rage, pure and molten. Mom had known they were circling, and she'd left me this weapon. I spent the day cataloging every file, every damning piece of evidence. The medical records showed Mom's cognitive decline, proof she couldn't have consented to any changes. The partnership agreements confirmed my stake was untouchable without my approval. The recordings were the final nail, evidence of coercion, maybe even fraud. But the high of discovery didn't last. That night, my apartment door was ajar when I got home. My heart stopped. Nothing was stolen, but the vineyard documents, the physical copies, were gone. The next day, a black SUV trailed me from work, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. Then came the call, a blocked number with nothing but static, the silence heavier than any threat. I knew who was behind it. Brandon. His startup was a house of cards, and he had the tech skills to make my life hell. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was personal, and it was dangerous. I barely slept, my mind racing. I couldn't go to the police, not yet. I had no proof the break-in was connected, and Brandon's charm would make me look paranoid. I was alone, cornered, my mother's legacy slipping through my fingers. But the SD card, hidden in my locket, was my shield. I wouldn't let them win. I started building my case, working in secret, my apartment, a fortress of papers and paranoia. I reached out to an old law school friend, a hacker with a knack for finding what people hid. She dug into Brandon's startup, uncovering shady shell companies and investors who didn't exist. It was a start, but it wasn't enough. I needed to hit them where it hurt, to expose them before they could silence me. The fear was constant, but so was Mom's voice in my head. I wasn't fighting for the vineyard anymore. I was fighting for her, for the truth she died to protect, and I'd be damned if I let them take that from me. The days blurred into nights, my apartment a maze of legal pads and empty coffee mugs. The SD card was my lifeline, its contents burned into my memory. Mom's voice, weak but fierce, exposing the vultures circling her deathbed. I worked in secret, my laptop password protected, the locket never leaving my neck. But the world outside was closing in. The black SUV was back, idling across the street from my office. Another call came, more static, the silence screaming louder than words. I stopped sleeping, my eyes darting to every shadow. Brandon was behind this, I knew it. His startup was a mirage, a front for something darker, and he had the tech to track me, to scare me, to make me feel like prey. I dug deeper, my hacker friend feeding me scraps of dirt on Brandon's company. Shell accounts, offshore transfers, investors who vanished when you looked too close. It was enough to confirm my suspicions, but not enough to take to court. I needed more. Something to tie Eleanor and Abernathy to the fraud. Something to make them bleed. The recordings were gold. But they weren't enough on their own. I needed leverage, and I needed it fast. One night, I found it. Tucked in the SD card's folder was a single email sent from Mom's account to herself, dated a week before she died. If anything happens to me, it read, look at Abernathy's escrow accounts. He's not what he seems. My heart pounded. Escrow accounts were a lawyer's playground, a place to hide money if you knew how to play dirty. I spent hours cross-referencing the vineyard's financials, my eyes burning from the screen's glow. There it was. A series of transfers, small but consistent, from the vineyard's operating budget to an account labeled Aurelia Trust. Abernathy's name was all over it, but the money wasn't going to the vineyard. It was funneling to a company tied to Brandon. The high of discovery was electric, but it didn't last. The next morning my car wouldn't start. A mechanic friend took a look and found the battery cables cut clean. Not an accident, sabotage. I felt the walls closing in, my courage fraying like cheap thread. I wanted to run, to disappear, to let them have the damn vineyard. But every time I closed my eyes I saw Mom, her hands in the soil, her voice in my ear. Truth is the soil, Natalie. I couldn't let her down. I started carrying a pocket knife, checking my locks twice, sleeping with a chair against the door. The fear was a living thing, but so was my anger. They thought they could scare me into submission, but they'd miscalculated. I wasn't just fighting for Mom's legacy anymore. I was fighting for myself, for the woman she'd raised me to be. I couldn't win in their arena, not yet. Their money, their lawyers, their connections would crush me in a courtroom. But I could make them feel my teeth. I called in a favor from a law school mentor, a shark of a litigator who owed me one. She lent me her firm's conference room in San Francisco, a gleaming space that screamed power. I sent an email to Eleanor, Richard, Abernathy, and Brandon, requesting a follow-up meeting. Neutral ground, I said. A chance to discuss terms. They took the bait, probably thinking I was ready to fold. I walked into that room like I was walking into battle, my folder of evidence tucked under my arm, Mom's locket warm against my chest. They were already there, Eleanor's posture perfect, Richard's hands fidgeting, Brandon's smirk as infuriating as ever. Abernathy sat at the head, his face a mask of calm authority. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. I spread my evidence across the table. The forged trust documents, the bank statements, Mom's medical records. You coerced her, I said, my voice steady. She was dying, and you preyed on her. I have proof. For a moment, I had them. Richard's face went gray. Brandon's smirk faltered, Abernathy's eyes widened just a fraction. But Eleanor recovered first, her laugh like ice cracking. "This is slander, Natalie," she said. "You're out of your depth. We have the best lawyers in California, we'll bury you. You'll be lucky to work as a paralegal when we're done." Richard finally spoke, his voice weak. "You're being ungrateful, Natalie. This is for the family." Brandon leaned forward, his eyes glinting. "You really think you can take us on? You've got nothing." I wanted to scream, to throw the recordings in their faces, but I held back. They didn't know about the SD card and I wasn't ready to play that card yet. I'd shown enough to shake them, to let them know I wasn't backing down. But their counterattack hit harder than I expected. Eleanor's threat wasn't empty. They had the resources to drag me through years of litigation, to ruin me financially and professionally. I left the room with my head high, but inside I was crumbling. I'd shown my hand and they'd called my bluff. I was out of moves. Back home, I sat in the dark, the weight of their power pressing down on me. I couldn't afford a war of attrition. I couldn't outspend them, outmaneuver them in their world. But Mom's voice echoed again, stubborn and clear. "Never forget what you're capable." I wasn't done yet. I just needed a new battlefield. The defeat stung, but it didn't break me. I couldn't fight their way, so I'd fight mine. Mom's legacy wasn't just the vineyard, it was her spirit, her refusal to bend. I cashed out my savings, took out a small business loan, and leased a scrappy plot of land next to Aurelia Vineyards. It was barely a quarter acre, overgrown and forgotten, but it was mine. I called it Elizabeth Collins Cellars, a name that felt like a fist raised in defiance. I wasn't just saving Mom's past, I was building her future. The work was brutal. I spent days clearing weeds, nights researching grapevines, my hands blistered and my bank account bleeding. Eleanor and her cronies didn't let up. A shipment of premium vines I'd ordered never arrived. Lost in transit, the supplier said, but I knew better. My water permit application stalled, buried in bureaucratic errors. Whispers spread through Napa's wine circles. Natalie Collins was unstable, litigious, a troublemaker. Every step forward was a fight, every victory small and hard-won. But I wasn't alone anymore. A local winemaker, an older woman named Clara who'd known Mom, offered me her spare equipment and a few hours of her time. A young couple, new to Napa and hungry for a cause, joined me, hauling dirt and planting vines. They believed in me, in Mom's dream. Their faith was a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't just fighting for myself. Slowly, painfully, the vineyard took shape. The first harvest was tiny, barely enough for a few bottles, but it was ours. I held a bottle in my hands, the label reading Elizabeth Collins Cellars, and felt Mom's pride like a warm hand on my shoulder. Still, the obstacles never stopped. A local critic, cozy with Eleanor, trashed my wine before it even hit the market. A bank loan I'd applied for was mysteriously denied. Brandon's shadow loomed larger. His tech skills meant he could hack my website, delay my permits, make my life a maze of dead ends. I was building something, but it felt like building on sand. Every night I fell into bed exhausted, wondering if I'd made a mistake, if I'd thrown my life away for a pipe dream. But then I'd touch the locket, feel the SD card's weight, and remember. I had a weapon they didn't know about. I wasn't ready to use it yet, but when I did, it would be a guillotine. For now, I'd keep building, keep fighting, keep Mom's legacy alive. One vine, one bottle, one day at a time. The months bled into each other, each day a battle to keep Elizabeth Collins Cellars alive. My tiny vineyard was a stubborn thing, clinging to life like a weed in cracked pavement. The first harvest had been small but fierce, the wine sharp and honest, like Mom's spirit in a bottle. Clara, my winemaker ally, taught me how to coax the best from the grapes, while my team, Jake and Lila, the young couple who'd bet on me, worked beside me, their hands as calloused as mine. We were a family, not by blood but by choice, and their belief in me was a fire that kept me going. But the war wasn't over. Eleanor's influence was a shadow over Napa, her connections choking my permits, my suppliers, my dreams. Brandon's tech tricks grew bolder. My website crashed twice, my emails mysteriously vanished. Once I found a GPS tracker under my car, its red light blinking like a taunt. I was holding on but barely. I'd been biding my time, waiting for the right moment to use the SD card's recordings. They were my ace, but I needed the perfect play. Then it hit me. A courtroom would only drag this out, let their lawyers twist the truth. I needed something bigger, something they couldn't bury. I thought of Mom, her voice on those recordings, weak but unyielding, and I knew what to do. I reached out to Sarah Voss, a Pulitzer-winning journalist I'd met at a legal conference years ago. She was a bloodhound for corruption, the kind of reporter who could topple empires with a single story. I sent her an anonymous email attaching one recording, just one, the worst of them, where Eleanor and Abernathy pressured Mom while she was barely conscious, her words slurred, her protests ignored. "Check the Aurelia Trust accounts," I wrote. "There's more where this came from." I waited, my heart in my throat, checking my burner phone every hour. A week later, Sarah replied, "I'm in. Send the rest." I sent her everything: recordings, documents, the escrow account details tying Abernathy to Brandon's fake startup. She worked fast, her team digging into the financials, cross-referencing names, following the money. I kept my head down, pouring my energy into the vineyard, pretending I was just a struggling winemaker. But inside, I was a coiled spring, ready to snap. The story broke on a Tuesday morning, the headlines screaming across the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle. Napa's dark secret: betrayal at Aurelia Vineyards. Sarah's article was a sledgehammer, detailing the coercion, the forged documents, the money siphoned from Mom's estate. The recordings were the centerpiece, Mom's voice played on a viral news segment, her pain and defiance cutting through the airwaves. Social media exploded, hashtags like "Justice for Elizabeth" trending nationwide. I watched it unfold from my vineyard, my phone buzzing with notifications, my team gathered around me, their eyes wide. "You did this," Leela whispered, squeezing my hand. I nodded, but I couldn't speak. The weight of it, Mom's truth finally free, was overwhelming. The fallout was swift and brutal. Abernathy's law firm dropped him within hours, the state bar launching an investigation that would strip his license. Brandon's investors pulled out, his startup collapsing like the house of cards it was. Eleanor's social empire crumbled, Napa's elite turned on her, invitations dried up, her name poison. My father, Richard, was a ghost, his silence louder than any apology. The Collins family's world imploded, their lies exposed to the sun. I'd won, but it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. They tried to fight back, of course. Eleanor released a statement, all crocodile tears and misunderstandings, but no one was buying it. The evidence was too damning, the public too angry. By the end of the week, they were negotiating a settlement, their lawyers begging for a deal to avoid criminal charges. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth had done its work. The settlement came faster than I expected. Faced with fraud and elder abuse charges, Eleanor and Richard folded. I got everything. Full ownership of Aurelia Vineyards, unencumbered by their trusts, plus damages that would keep my small winery afloat for years. Abernathy was disbarred, his reputation in ashes. Brandon's startup was bankrupt, his charm useless against the truth. My father sent a letter, a rambling apology. I didn't read past the first line. I didn't need his regret. I'd needed his courage, and he'd failed me long ago. I stood on the hill overlooking Aurelia Vineyards, the same hill where I'd started this fight. The vines stretched out below, their green leaves catching the sunset's glow. I held Mom's locket, its silver warm from my skin. This place was mine now, not just in name but in spirit. I merged Elizabeth Collins' cellars with Aurelia, bringing Jake, Leela, and Clara with me. We weren't just restoring Mom's legacy, we were building something new, something honest. The first bottles from my small plot were already earning quiet praise, their taste a promise of what we could do. But the victory wasn't what I'd imagined. It wasn't about the land or the money. It was about what I'd learned, what I'd become. I'd walked through betrayal, fear, and despair, and I'd come out stronger. Mom's true inheritance wasn't the vineyard. It was the fire she'd lit in me, the resilience to fight for what was right, the courage to build something from nothing. I saw it now, in the way I walked through the vines, in the way my team looked at me, in the way I carried her locket like a shield. One evening as the sun dipped low, I walked the rows alone, the air thick with the scent of earth and grapes. I opened the locket, tracing the photo of me and Mom, her smile fierce even in sickness. I didn't need to hear her voice anymore, it was part of me, woven into my bones. I'd fought for her, for the truth, and I'd won. But more than that, I'd found my own strength, my own purpose. I wasn't just her daughter, I was her legacy, a protector of what was right, a builder of what could be. I closed the locket and looked out at the vineyard, its beauty a quiet promise. The fight wasn't over. Not really. There would always be challenges, always be those who tried to take what wasn't theirs. But I was ready. I had Mom's fire, my team's loyalty, and a truth that no one could bury. I wasn't just standing guard for Aurelia. I was standing guard for anyone who'd been underestimated, betrayed, pushed aside. This was my promise, to Mom and to myself, to keep fighting, to keep building, to keep the soil of justice fertile. As the stars began to prick the sky, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Not the sharp thrill of revenge, but something deeper, truer. I'd lost so much, my family, my trust, my innocence, but I'd gained something greater. I was whole, not because I'd won, but because I'd fought. And I'd keep fighting, for as long as it took, for as long as there was truth to defend. In the end, this wasn't a battle of lawyers or money. It was a battle of truth versus lies. They had all the power, but I had the facts, hidden in a locket, waiting for the right moment. The most important thing you can do when you feel cornered is to hold on to the truth, no matter how small or quiet it seems. Document everything. Be patient. Because while lies can build empires, a single, undeniable truth is all it takes to bring them crumbling down. Let justice grow.